Okay, Ji. Assalamu alaikum. So now we're going to talk about the last topic of the general anatomy, that is neurology. What is neurology exactly? Neurology is the study of structure of nervous system. That is what we label as neurology. What does neurology do? It enables us, the body, to react continuously to the external and the internal environments, and controls and integrates the various activities of the body. So it responds to various changes which are occurring outside the body and inside the body, and it controls and integrates the various activities of the body. That is neurology. What is the basic components of what does neurology contain? It contains the nervous tissue, that is the basic structure that is composed of the neurons. These are the nerve cells, these are the excitable nerve cells. Then it's the supportive framework, that is the neuroglia. These are the neuroglial cells. These are the special supporting cells, the way we have fibers and the other connect tissues. In this we have the cells which are called the glial tissue. We do not have fibers, but we have cells which are called your glial tissue, and these are the special supporting cells which provide nutrition, conduction, excitability, protection. All that function is done by these glial cells. And then you have the ordinary connective tissue, that is includes your meninges, ganglia, capsules, nerve investments, all that. That is, other than the nerve cells and the neuroglial, you have the connective tissue which you cannot put either in the neurons or in the group of the neuroglia. It is from the meninges of the ganglia and the capsules or the coverings, that is endomysium, perimysium, epimysium, all these. The excitable component of the nervous tissue is your neuron, and this is the structure and functional unit. You can see it has a body, it has processes. There is one process that is called the axon, and there are multiple processes which are the small ones which are called the dendrites. What is a neuron? The neuron has a body, processes, the dendrites and the axons. The neurites, the dendrites, they are the receiving end, that is, they receive information, conducting it towards the cell body, and the long tubular single process, that is, which sends impulses away, is called the axon. And then there is myelin, that is a lipid protein substance which covers the nerve fibers around it, increasing the velocity of the impulses. And neurons then have a synapse with which they communicate with each other, and thus the continuous of the information is sent on. The structure of a neuron, the nerve cell body, cytoplasm, which is called the nucleoplasm, then there is, which has the genes in it, and then it has the uncoiled state, the chromosomes. That is why the nucleus, you will see it as a pale, and the fine chromatin granules are widely dispersed in it. There is a prominent nucleolus, and then there is something in the females. One of the two X chromosomes is compact in the central nervous tissue. It is compact and it is visible, and it is known as the Barr body, and this is basically said to be the one inactive X chromosome in the females, that is called as, which becomes the heterochromatin, and that is known as the Barr body. You will not be able to see this sex chromosome in case of the males. It's composed of and situated in the surface of the nuclear membrane. So Barr body is a distinct feature for the females. Then there is nuclear envelope, double layer. The envelope is double layered, possesses fine nuclear pores. That is, there are gaps in between the cells which are going to be covered by small diaphragms. Cytoplasm is rich in granular and agranular endoplasmic reticulum. It contains all its organelles, little substances, Golgi complex, mitochondria, filaments, etc., etc. Everything is there. Nissl substances are basically collection of granules which are distributed throughout the cytoplasm. These Nissl substances are basically collection of your ribosomes, and there is one area that is the beginning of the axon where these Nissl substances are absent, and this area is called the axon hillock, and it's said to be one of the diagnostic feature for identifying the process, that whether it is axon or dendrite. The granular material also extends into the proximal part of the dendrites. It is not present in the axon, and it is a collective material of the ribosomes, rough endoplasmic ribosomes. So if you see this body, you can see these dendrites, you can see the different nucleus, then you can see the double layer nucleoplasm, and the covering of the nucleus, and the layer that is there, which are the pores which are there, which is the exchange of the material. And then there is the region of the axon hillock, which does not have the Nissl granules, and you can see all the other substance in it. Then what are the different types of neurons? You can classify them according to different ways, according to the number of the length, the length and the mode of the branching of the neurites. They can be one process, that is unipolar, or you call it the pseudo-unipolar. That is, one axon, one process emits and then it divides into two. So that is why you call it the pseudopolar, unipolar, because further on it's going to divide into two. Those are present as a single neurite that divides a short. One is going to act as an axon and the other is going to act as a dendrite. So one which is going to act as an axon, that is going to go towards the periphery, one proceeding to the peripheral structure and then entering the central nervous system. And then this has a structure and functional characteristics of an axon. The fine terminal branches of the receptors are referred as dendrites. You see such types of neurons in the posterior root ganglia. If you see this is the pseudo-unipolar, that is one stem dividing into two. That is the central axons and the receptor axons. One that is going towards the periphery and one that is going towards the center. One is going to act as an axon, the other is going to act as the sensory fibers. Then you have the bipolar neurons. They possess an elongated cell body from each end of which is a single neurite emerges. Retina is a very good example for this bipolar type. Multipolar, many neurites arise and with many dendrites but just one axon, and the remainder are the dendrites. Most of the CNS, that is brain and the spinal cord, is of multipolar type of neurons. You say this unipolar, or you can say the pseudo-unipolar. This is the bipolar, two processes are there, and then you have this multipolar. Then you can divide the nervous tissue as peripheral nervous system, you have the autonomic ganglia, or the central nervous system. Then you can divide it according to the size. They are Golgi 1 type, 2 and type. So they are, according to the different sizes, you divide them into Golgi 1 and Golgi 2. Then there is Jacob's classification. It is class 1 and class 2, or those which are recently developed or present, or those which are ancient. You are going to call them class 1, and those which developed recently, then these neurons, they are going to be called as class 2. According to the shape, dendritic processes, patterns, you can divide it into the stellate cells. Then you have the pyramidal cells. They are pyramidal in shape with axon coming from one end and the dendrites from the other end. Then you have the Purkinje cells. They are flask-shaped with the tree-like branching from the one end of the cell. These are basically present in the cerebellum, and pyramidal cells, they are seen in the central nervous system or the cerebrum. Multipolar neurons, then you can classify it as according to the different pigments that they contain. One is neuromelanin in the substantia nigra. They have blackish pigmentation, copper in the pons you can see, then zinc, cerebral cortex, lipofuscin, that is old age or the senile neurons which are degenerating, and then iron. This gives you in the red nucleus, which is said to be because the neuron contains the red pigmentation. That is why it is called and it is iron, it is the red type. Then you can have amacrine cells. They lack the axon only. Amacrine, no axon, but only small dendrites are present. So those are called the amacrine cells of the retina, of the olfactory bulb. Then you can have adendritic, no dendrites of the body of the unipolar neurons receive and integrate information from single. That is, one axon acts as the sensory and the motor component. Both, there are no dendrites. So you can classify them this way. Base, then you can classify the nervous tissue according to the differentiation from the neuroblast. They can be receptor ones, that is sensitive to the environment. They can be interneurons, that is communicating between the two neurons, that is the upper and the lower, that is the interneuron, and the effector neurons, those would be the motor ones which come from the center. They go to the periphery and make the action. So according to their differentiation, receptor, sensory, interneuron communicating the two types, that is the upper and the lower, and the effector, which is the motor portion. Then you have the neuroglia. Neuroglia is 5 times said to be more abundant as compared to the nervous tissue. They are non-excitable, they are non-neuronal, and their major function is supporting, insulating, and nourishing of the neurons. You include in the central nervous system oligodendroglia, astrocytes, ependymal cells, and microglia cells. In the peripheral nervous system, the neuroglia include the stellate cells, satellite cells around which the neurons in the spinal posterior root and the ganglia, and then you have the Schwann cells. So in place of oligodendroglia, you have the Schwann cells in the peripheral nervous system, and you have the satellite cells around the neurons in the spinal posterior root and the autonomic ganglia. That is, the satellite cells are present in the ganglia. So in the central nervous system, you have oligodendroclea, which perform the myelination, whereas in the myelination in the peripheral nervous system is being performed by the Schwann cells, and in the ganglia you have these satellite cells, and the other supporting cells are the astrocytes, ependymal cells, and the microglia. If you can see in this picture, the astrocytes are of two types, the protoplasmic astrocytes and the fibrillous astrocytes. Basic function is the support, and they provide the nutrition. As you can see, they have their foot process in relation with the capillary. Then you have these oligodendrocytes, that is, they have very few processes, and these oligodendrocytes, they are produced for the myelination in the nerve fibers in the central nervous system. Then you have these microglia. These are said to be the defense mechanism cells. These are very small in size, and they have many processes which are there. And then you have these ependymal cells. These ependymal cells are basically the cells which line the cavities of the brain, that is the ventricles of the brain. So these are the four types. These protoplasmic and the fibrous astrocytes, basically they provide nutrition and they provide the main supportive function of the nervous tissue which is there, and also the nutrition. This neuroglia, again, you can see that they are the microglia, the defense mechanism. These astrocytes, they provide nutrition, and they have the also the supportive function, ependyma. They line the cavities. If you see these ependymal cells, they form the double layer ependymal cells. It forms the choroid plexus, that is, produces the CSF. It lines the cavities of the brain. These are the astrocytes. They provide nutrition. Oligodendrocytes, these are for olig means less number of processes, that is myelination in the central nervous system. If you compare all these neuroglia, the astrocytes, there are two types, the fibrous and the protoplasmic. Small cell bodies, small, long, slender processes. Protoplasmic have short processes. The fibrous type is present in the white matter and provides the supportive framework. Gray matter is having the protoplasmic type of astrocytes, and they have phagocytic function. Oligodendrocytes enroll myelinated nerves surround the neuron cell bodies. They form myelin in central nervous system. Microglia is scattered throughout the nervous system, proliferate in disease and rejoined by the blood monocytes. So the basically defense mechanism. Ependyma, columnar or cuboidal, they line the ventricles or the cavities, and they circulate CSF and the double layer. And when they invaginate, they produce the CSF. Then that was the nervous tissue, that is the glial tissue, that is there, the supportive framework, the main receptor cells or the active cells, those are the neurons. Then you have certain receptor endings. These receptors are going to bring your impulses from the periphery to the central nervous system. A structure which can detect a change in the environment is said to be a receptor. There are somatic receptors from the body, that is exterior receptors placed close to the surface. They are going to be concerned with pain, temperature, touch. In this, we include the general cutaneous receptors, that is, they respond to mechanical, mechanothermal, nociceptors. These are basically, mechano is responding to touch, deformation. Thermo is the temperature change. They are going to sensitive to that, and nociceptors is about to damage the tissue. That is, it is very painful, and this receptor, it will tell you that it is going to damage the tissue. So you have general mechanical deformation, that is the touch. Then you have the thermoreceptors, changes in the temperature, and nociceptors. All these are the general cutaneous receptors which are coming from the periphery. These are included in the exterior receptors. Then you have the special sensory receptors which are related with special functions. That is, in the eyes, you have the electromagnetic for the rods and cones, and you have chemoreceptors which are concerned with the chemical composition of the blood and associated with taste and smell also, and oxygen and carbon dioxide concentrations in the blood. These are your special sensory receptors. Those were your general cutaneous receptors. Then you have proprioceptors, which are present in the joints. They tell you the change, even if your eyes are closed, what is the position of your body, where you are standing, what is the position of the joint. That is concerned with the body movement, and that is called proprioception. And then visceral, that is coming from the inside of the viscera, that is the glands or the viscera, and they will tell you the different position, whether the viscera is in pain, whether it's in contracted form, but all that is visceral receptors. So you have basically three types of receptors, that is exterior receptors from the skin, visceral receptors from the body and deep inside the organs, and proprioceptors, that is coming from the joints, that give you the body sense. And exterior receptors can be general cutaneous, and they can be special ones, that is concerned with basic special function. So you have two categories. And these receptors, they function as they tell you that the information from they detect a change in the environment of that receptor or that part of the body. So you see, these are the different types of receptors that you see. They can be divided into two types. Some can be encapsulated, that they have a connective tissue capsule around it, and some are non-encapsulated. The non-encapsulated ones are very important as free nerve endings. These are present in the skin, and these tell you very sensitive to touch and pain. Then you have Merkel disc and hair follicle receptors. And then you have the encapsulated ones, which are covered by connective tissue capsule. These are called the Meissner's corpuscles, Pacinian corpuscles, and Ruffini corpuscles. The free nerve endings, they are widely distributed throughout the body. They are devoid, and but they are called the free nerve endings because they do not have any covering of the myelin sheath on it or the connective tissue formation, and they detect pain, and they are present mostly in all places of the body. Then you have these Merkel discs. These are hairless skin, fingertips, and in the hair follicles, again, they are concerned with touch, but they are in the form of a disc. Then you have hair follicle receptors, which are there at the root, nerve fiber surrounding the follicle, and changes in the direction of the hair is going to tell you, or the position of the hair follicle, they are going to be responding to the vibration or the movement of the hair follicle, and that is, they are sensitive to touch, and all of a sudden you will be able to appreciate that the hair has moved. This is because of these hair follicle receptors. Then you have Meissner's corpuscles. These are located in the dermal papilla of the skin. As you can see, that is the epidermis, the dermis of the skin. They are surrounded by a connective tissue capsule. They are concerned again with touch. Then you have these Pacinian corpuscles, where the nerve fiber comes in inside, and it's covered with all sorts of connective tissue layers, and they have the connective tissue capsule on the outside. It's just an onion ring appearance. It's widely distributed throughout the body. It consists of a capsule and the central core you can see in the nerve fibers. We're going to talk about all these receptors in detail in histology. That is why I'm just touching each and what is the function of it. This is a rapidly adapting mechanoreceptor sensitive to vibration, again present in the skin. So it is going to be mechanoreceptors, vibration, and touch. Then you have these Ruffinian corpuscles located in the dermis of the hairy skin, surrounded by the cellular capsule, and they are going to be concerned with stretch. What is the function exactly of these cutaneous receptors? The type of sensation felt is determined by the specific area of the central nervous system to which, if it is from whether because of temperature or because of pinprick, the impulses are going to go to the center of pain in the central nervous system. So the sensation that is going to be felt is that of pain. So the type of sensation felt is determined by the specific area. So any cause which causes pain, but it goes to the same center which is concerned with the pain, so it would be related with the pain sensation. So again, if pain nerve fiber is stimulated by heat, touch, cold, or pressure, the individual will experience only pain, not telling because of what. So that is the function of the cutaneous receptors. Then these were present in the skin. Then you have these receptors which are present in the joint. They tell you the movement of the joint, and this type, these are the encapsulated, and the information regarding the position and movement of the joint, whether your leg is bent or it is straight, all that you know, whether your eyes are closed or they're open, that is going to be told by these proprioceptor fibers regarding the position and movement of the joint. And there's another fourth type, non-encapsulated, which is sensitive to excessive movements and is to transmit pain sensations. Then you have these neuromuscular spindles and neurotendinous spindles, which are there. These neuromuscular spindles, they are found in the skin, and they are used for the controlling the muscular activity, how whether the muscle is relaxed or contracted, that is concerned with these neuromuscular spindles. You have neurotendinous spindles. These are present in the tendons, and sensory information regarding the position of the tendon and the muscle, that is the function of your neurotendinous spindles. These were the receptors which are going to receive. Then we have the effectors, that is, they are going to send order to the organ that do this in return, or to the periphery of the body that this has to be the reply. That is what we call as effectors. So nervous system controls the body activities done by the contraction of the skeletal muscle, cardiac muscle, smooth muscle in the viscera, and secretion of the glands. That is the role of the effector. That is, these are going to act, and then the effector function is going to be there. This is all controlled by your nervous system, whether it is your central or peripheral. It is going to affect by the endocrine system is going to control, and then there is a diffused neuroendocrine system. So all these effectors are further controlled by your nervous system. The nervous system can be, so we had receptors, we had effectors. That is, receptor is going to receive the information and effectors are going to do the action. We had the nervous tissue. Nervous tissue was composed of neurons, that is the excitable cells, and the non-excitable cells, which is your neuroglia, in which you have the different types of cells, which is acting as your supportive framework or the connective tissue framework of the nervous tissue. It's cells which is forming the connective tissue framework, which is not fibers as in the other system. Then you have the receptors and the effectors. These are there. Then nervous system can be divided structurally. You have the nervous system. It can be divided according to different ways. The nervous system is structurally central nervous system or the peripheral nervous system. The central part is brain and the spinal cord. Peripheral is the cranial and the spinal nerves, which are there, and the ganglia associated with that is lying on the periphery. That is your cranial nerves and your spinal nerves. Functionally, you can say somatic nervous system and autonomic nervous system. Somatic is the body wall, that is all your muscles which are concerned, that part, and the autonomic, that is related with your organs which are there. So you can have functionally divided into the somatic nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. Classification of the nervous system, you can have anatomical classification according to region. So it can be central nervous system containing the brain and the spinal cord. The brain lies in the cranial cavity and controls all the governing centers, and spinal cord in the vertebral canal, and it is concerned with the lower reflex activities. Then you have the functional or the physiological classification, as we said, somatic nervous system, innervation of your skeletal muscle, tendon, joints, etc. That is on the periphery, and visceral, that is concerned with the organs, which is there. Involuntary in nature, that is voluntary in nature, the somatic nervous system. Then you can classify the nervous tissue or nervous system as embryological classification from the neural tube, what part developed from what. So it was divided into the forebrain, certain portions developed from the part the neural tube. The neural tube is going to be divided into three: the forebrain, midbrain, and the hindbrain. Certain organs are going to develop from the brain. They're going to develop from the forebrain, some from the midbrain, and then from the hindbrain. So according to that, you classify the nervous tissue. Forebrain, what develops from the forebrain, it is called prosencephalon. That which is going to develop from the midbrain or the mesencephalon, and hindbrain or the rhombencephalon. Rhombencephalon is further divided into meton and myelencephalon, that is the pons and the medulla oblongata. And then you have the spinal cord. So according to the embryological origin, it can be divided into different parts. Then you have an enteric nervous system or the mini brain. This enteric nervous system is present in the walls of the gastrointestinal tract, organs, heart, respiratory system, maybe, and this is said to automatically control the movements or the contraction and relaxation of the muscles of the organs. Neurons are present in the walls of the GIT, pancreas, and gallbladder. Motility, secretion of intestines is dependent on the functional integrity of this integrated plexus which is there. It is automatically controlled, and it is called intrinsic nervous system because it innervates the different organ walls, and it is automatic in nature. This is the mini nervous system. That is, all the control is in it, the gut lumen, and it's in the walls of the gut or the different organs of the tubes itself, and they're going to control their contraction and relaxation. That is called the mini nervous system. That is, the control of the higher centers is not there. It is just working on its own, and it is autonomic. Then you have something which is not exactly included in the neurons or not included in the neuroglial tissue, but it is other form of connective tissue which forms the meninges. Meninges are the three membranous layers: pia mater, arachnoid mater, and dura mater, collectively called the meninges. The meninges and the cerebrospinal fluid protect the brain located between the pia and the arachnoid mater. So the brain and spinal cord are intimately covered on the outside by, first is the pia mater, then outer to that is the arachnoid mater, and the outermost is the tough dura mater. The dura mater of the brain is related to the internal surface of the cranial cavity or the bone, and spinal cord is also surrounded by the vertebral column, that is the bony part, and the layers are the same. The major divisions of the central and peripheral nervous system. In the central nervous system, the parts are brain, forebrain, that is cerebrum, and diencephalon, where you have thalamus, hypothalamus, metathalamus, and epithalamus. Diencephalon is in between the two cerebral hemispheres. Then you have the midbrain, then you have the hindbrain. Hindbrain includes medulla, pons, and the cerebellum. And below that, in the central nervous system, you have the spinal cord. It has cervical segments, thoracic segments, lumbar segments, sacral segments, and the coccygeal segments. That is all that is included in the central nervous system. Then is the this is the broad division that you do when you classify the nervous tissue, that is central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. Peripheral nervous system is going to include the cranial nerves, 12 pairs of cranial nerve which come out through the skull, and spinal nerves, the 31 pairs that exit out from the vertebral column. So the central part of this nervous system, that is the spinal cord and the brain itself, that is going to be your central nervous system, and the nerve fibers which are coming out along with their ganglia, that is going to be your peripheral nervous system, the cranial nerves plus your spinal nerves. See in this picture, this is the central nervous system, that is the cerebrum, that is then forebrain, midbrain, hindbrain, as you can see, and then is the spinal cord, and then the different plexuses of the nerves which are going, that is going to be your peripheral nervous system. Then briefly talking about each part of the nervous system. The brain that lies in the cranial cavity, it is continuous with the spinal cord through the foramen magnum. It is surrounded by three meninges. Outermost is dura mater, then there is the pia mater, arachnoid mater, and then is the pia mater. And these are all continuous with the meninges of the spinal cord. And the spinal fluid or the cerebrospinal fluid drains in the subarachnoid space between the arachnoid mater and the pia mater. That is the subarachnoid space, the CSF, which is said to be the invagination or the double layer pia mater with the vascularization that is going to produce the CSF. This circulates in the subarachnoid space coming from the cerebrum around it, the main part of the brain, through the cavities, to the spinal cord, and then it runs in the canal of the spinal cord, and this is going to circulate. Divided into the brain into major order descending from the spinal cord, the hindbrain, the midbrain, and then you have the forebrain. Hindbrain is divided into medulla, pons, and cerebellum, whereas forebrain may be divided into the diencephalon and the cerebrum. Diencephalon is the part between the two cerebral hemispheres. It includes thalamus, hypothalamus, epithalamus, and metathalamus. Then is the brainstem below the forebrain. That is a collective term for medulla, pons, and midbrain. These three together are called the brainstem. Cerebellum is not included in this. See this? Then is, so we were talking about the brain as whole, you can call it the forebrain. Then is the hindbrain, that is the medulla, is the conical in shape, connects the pons superiorly to the spinal cord below. It contains many collections of nuclei and serves as a conduit all the passage through the ascending and the descending fibers pass. Then is the pons, inferior to the midbrain and superior to the medulla. It's a bridge between, derives its name from the large number of transverse fibers which on its aspect connecting the two cerebellar hemispheres. That is why it is called a bridge for the fibers. Many nuclei and ascending and descending fibers pass through it from the spinal cord to medulla, medulla to the pons, and then to the midbrain. Cerebellum, it lies within the posterior cranial fossa of the skull and is posterior to the pons and the medulla oblongata, two lateral placed hemispheres connected together by a central narrow portion which is called the vermis. The cerebellum is connected to the midbrain by the superior cerebral peduncles, these as white matter. Then by the pons, the middle cerebral peduncles, it is connected to the medulla by the inferior peduncles. That is, it is a tract. So these are small tracts which connect the cerebellum to the different parts of the brain. That is midbrain by the superior cerebellar peduncle. Peduncle is nothing, a group of fibers of white matter bringing and taking information to and fro from the different nuclei. Then is the middle cerebellar peduncle. They link the cerebellum to the pons, then the medulla by the inferior cerebellar peduncles. large bundles of nerve fibers connecting cerebellum to the rest of the part. The surface of each cerebellar hemisphere is inverted and is composed of gray matter which is thrown into folds or folia. Masses of gray matter are deep buried in the cerebellum, and the most common one is known as the dentate nucleus. They're four in number, but the most prominent, they're very small, and the most prominent one is the dentate nucleus. Then is the midbrain. First hindbrain, then is the midbrain. The midbrain is the narrow part of the brain, then connects forebrain to the hindbrain. Connectivity is the cavity of this area is the cerebral aqueduct, which connects it above to the lateral ventricle and below to the third and the fourth ventricles. Midbrain contains many nuclei and bundles of ascending and descending fibers. Diencephalon is the part which is hidden between the cerebral hemispheres, and it contains a dorsal thalamus and a ventral hypothalamus. The thalamus is a large egg-shaped mass of gray matter that lies on either side of the third ventricle. That is the thalamus, and the hypothalamus is the lower part of the lower wall or lateral wall of the third ventricle. So the encephalon is basically these thalami group. Then is the cerebrum. Largest part of the brain consists of two cerebral hemispheres, which are connected by a mass of white matter that is called the corpus callosum. That is your projection fiber, the callosal fibers. That is one cerebral hemisphere connected to the other cerebral hemisphere through the corpus callosum. Extends from the frontal to the occipital lobe. These are separated by a long fissure, which projects into the falx cerebri. It has gray matter and white matter. Gray matter is thrown into folds separated by fissure or sulci. White matter is a central cord. Gray matter is on the outside. This deep gray matter buried is what is going to produce the different nuclei. The inner side of the cerebrum is the white matter containing several large masses of gray matter, which is going to form what is we call as the basal nuclei or the basal ganglia, or you call them as caudate and lentiform nucleus, the cavity which controls your coarse movements of the body. Basically, the are produced if the fine movements which are composed by these are not checked. The cavity present within the cerebral hemisphere in the cerebrum is called the lateral ventricle. Two lateral ventricles communicate with the third ventricle and through the interventricular foramen. So in the forebrain, you have the two lateral ventricles which are connected by the interventricular foramen, which connected to the midbrain. In the midbrain, you have a canal which is called the cerebral aqueduct, and it opens up, and in the opening up is the cavity between the two cerebral hemispheres. That is going to be your third ventricle, that is one in number, and then that continues below to your midbrain to as the cerebral aqueduct, and then below to the pons and the medulla, the fourth ventricle, which is also the median central one portion, and then the canal of the spinal cord. Through all this, the cerebral spinal fluid circulates. See the different parts, the sulci which are there. Then what are the cavities of the brain or the ventricles of the brain? The medulla oblongata, pons, and cerebellum surround the cavity filled with cerebrospinal fluid. Basically, the pia mater and the arachnoid mater, when they cover the brain, they cover it very intimately with each other. But at there are certain places, when they project from one space to the other, one place to the other, at times the space between the two increases in size, and that is what we call as the cisterns, or it's basically the enlargement of the subarachnoid space, which contains the cerebrospinal fluid. And in the third ventricle, and the below in the medulla and all, that is the fourth ventricle, superiorly to the third ventricle by the cerebral aqueduct, and the midbrain, and inferiorly it is continuous with the central canal or the spinal cord. Communicates with the subarachnoid space through three openings. These are called the foramen, Luschka, and Magendie. Then is the spinal cord. This part of the central nervous system, the spinal cord is situated within the vertebral column and is surrounded by three meninges, dura mater, arachnoid mater, and the pia mater. Its function is protection by the cerebrospinal fluid, which surrounds the spinal cord in the subarachnoid space. CSF flows through that subarachnoid space. Is cylindrical, begins from the foramen magnum in continuation with the medulla of the brain. It terminates at the lumbar region below, tapers off, forms the conus medullaris, and from the apex of which prolongation of pia mater, the phylum, terminal descends to the back of the coccyx. So lumbar region is the area where this brain spinal cord is going to finish off. Below it's just the nerves which are called the chorda equina and of the fibers, like the horsetail fibers. Horsetail, it is called the name chorda equina. Along the length of the spinal cord, they are attached 31 pairs of spinal nerves by anterior or motor root, and the posterior or the sensory root is attached to the series of rootlets extend the whole length of the spinal cord. Each posterior nerve root possesses a posterior root ganglion, the white cells of which give rise to peripheral and the central nervous system. The peripheral is going to go towards the sensory one, go towards the periphery, and central they are going to be the motor fibers which are going to go upwards, bring orders back, and then act on the substance. Structure of the spinal cord is composed of inner core of gray matter, which is H-shaped, or you can call it a butterfly shape, which is surrounded by the outer covering of the white matter. The gray matter H pillar, anterior and posterior columns united by thread commissure, or a connecting part which contains the central canal. Then is the white matter, which can be divided into three bundles, that is anterior, lateral, and posterior white columns. These are called the white columns because it contains the bundles of nerve fibers which are going up and below. If you see in this picture, this is the H-shaped spinal cord. That is the H is the gray matter. That is the neurons which are present with the neuroglia, and then these two horns, they are connected. The anterior horn and the posterior horn. The posterior horn, you can see it reaches to the periphery of the spinal cord, and there it has the ganglion with it, the dorsal ganglion, as we've already said, and the ventral does not reach to the periphery, but it contains the motor fibers. These two are connected by the central commissure. This is called the central gray commissure, which has the central canal in it. And then outside it is the white matter. This white matter is divided into three columns. That is the anterior column, then the lateral column, and then you can see the posterior column. The anterior column is between this median sulcus and the anterior horn. Between the anterior and the posterior, you have the lateral column, and between the posterior sulcus and the posterior horn, you have the posterior column. So all these contains the posterior columns of fibers, anterior, lateral, and posterior. This contains all the fibers which are ascending or coming down from the or motor fibers which are coming downwards, bringing the impulses. Then is the peripheral nervous system. Peripheral nervous system consists of the nerve fibers and cell bodies outside the central nervous system that get cut impulses away from the central nervous system. That is bringing orders from the periphery, the center, they go from away from the central nervous system. These are the fibers which are traveling to the periphery. That forms the peripheral nervous system. The composition or the structure of this peripheral nervous system is going to be the nerve fiber. This nerve fiber consists of an axon. Basically, it is the axon which forms a nerve fiber. It is covered by the membrane which is called the neurolemma, and surrounding one axon is your endoneural tube. You form these nerve fibers in the form of bundles. The whole is covered by the perineurium. Then there is in small bundles, they're covered by the epineurium, and each axon is going to be covered by a connective tissue fiber which is called your endoneural connective tissue sheath. I will show you in the next picture. The neurolemma consists of the cell membranes of the Schwann cells that immediately surround the axon, because the myelination of the nerve fiber is going to be produced by the Schwann cell. So it consists of the cell membranes of the Schwann cells that immediately surround the axon, separating the other end. The peripheral nervous system neurolemma forms two classes, one that is going to be myelinated and the other that is going to be non-myelinated. The axon is going to be, the individual axon is going to be myelinated or non-myelinated, and it is the Schwann cells which are going to produce these myelinations. The neurolemma of the unmyelinated nerve fibers is composed of Schwann cells. Multiple axons are separated. It covers it, but it does not myelinate it. And the neurolemma of the myelinated consists of Schwann cells specific to an individual axon, and the unmyelinated, many axons are collectively composed of the connective tissue of the one Schwann cell. Multiple axons are separately embedded within the cytoplasm of each cell. So these Schwann cells do not produce myelin, cutaneous nerve supply. One Schwann cell is going to produce myelin for each axon. That is the myelinated nerve fiber, whereas many axons are going to be collectively surrounded by the neurolemma or the plasma lemma of the Schwann cell, which is not going to myelinate it. And so these are unmyelinated and do not produce myelin. Cutaneous nerves are unmyelinated. If you see this, this is unmyelinated nerve fiber. Many nerve fibers, many axons, collectively they are surrounded by one Schwann cell. In this, individual Schwann cell is going to cover the individual axon, that is myelinated nerve fibers. This is the structure of a peripheral nerve. Peripheral nerve is in the form of bundles covered by the epineurium. Then these small bundles, they are in the form of covered by individual connective tissue that is called the perineurium. Then these connective tissue fibers with the individual axons that is covered by connective tissue that is called the endoneurium. So you have epineurium, perineurium, and endoneurium. And outside it, if it is a myelinated one, you're going to have the Schwann cell with its myelination. What is the nerve? Nerve fiber was just the axon. Then how a nerve is formed? It consists of bundles of nerve fibers outside the central nervous system, or fascicles. That is just the bundles, or fascicles means the same in case of a larger nerve. The connective tissue coverings that surround and bind the nerve fibers and fascicles together is your endoneurium, one axon, a bundle, a perineurium, and the whole of the muscle, that the nervous nerve, that is the epineurium. Blood vessels, which we said vasa nervosa, nervosum, that nourish the nerve fibers and their coverings. They're present in the connective tissue, fairly strong and resilient because the nerve fibers are supported and protected by these three coverings, that is endoneurium, perineurium, and epineurium. Because once this nervous system is damaged, or the nervous tissue is damaged, it does not remember, it does not regenerate. This is the peripheral nerve. You see, the whole of the peripheral nerve is covered by the epineurium. This epineurium is having individual muscle bundles inside it, which are covered by one bundle is covered by the perineurium. And then inside, if you take each bundle and you outline it, there are many nerve fibers in it, that is the axons, and these are covered by individually by the endoneurium. This is the picture of a peripheral nerve. E is endoneurium, P is perineurium, the whole. And when the whole of the many bundles together, they are going to be covered by the epineurium. Then is the peripheral nervous system. This peripheral nervous system is going to be composed of the different nerves that shows you the cranial nerves and the cervical spinal nerves. The cranial nerves are the 12 in number, coming from the cranial cavity, and the spinal nerves, they are 31 in pairs coming from the different areas. Coming from the spinal cord finishes at the level of lumbar 1, and below that the nerve fibers, because they have to emit out through their respective intervertebral foramina, they are going to go down till their respective intervertebral foramina and form a horse-tail structure. That is what we call as the cauda equina. And the spinal cord itself is covered by the pyometer, which is called the filum terminale. So the individual nerves which are coming out from the spinal cord, they are going to emit out from their respective intervertebral foramina. Supposing it is L1, it is going to come out through the L1 intervertebral foramina. And if it is T2, it is going to come out from the level of T2, but because your vertebral column that finishes at the lumbar level, so those nerves which are below that finishing point, or the sacral part of the vertebra, the spinal cord, so these nerves have to reach, they still follow their own pattern, they reach their respective intervertebral foramen and then they come out. This forms this horse-tail structure, which is called as the cauda equina. What are the different types of nerves that are present? Afferent, which are sensory, neural impulses to the central nervous system from the periphery of the body. Efferent, which are the motor ones, they bring orders back from the central nervous system. The peripheral nervous system is anatomically and operationally continuous with the central nervous system, that is, the control is in the central nervous system. The peripheral nervous system lies outside the cranial cavity and the vertebral canal, and it includes nerves. Either can be cranial or spinal. Cranial nerves exit through the cranial cavity. The foramina arise from the brain, and there are 11 arises from the superior part. The other 11 of the 12 pairs arise from the brain, and the other pair, that is 11th, arises from the superior part of the spinal cord. Cranial nerves from the central nervous system, some convey only sensory fibers, some motor, and some both types of fibers. The communication between cranial nerves and between cranial nerves and the upper spinal nerves. Thus, a nerve that initially conveys motor fibers only may receive sensory fibers. So it is a mixed type of fibers. 12 cranial nerves, individually having its own functions. Then you have the spinal segmental nerves exiting through the vertebral column through the intervertebral foramina. As I've said already, spinal nerves arise in bilateral pairs, both from the specific spinal cord segment. They are 31 in number, and just if you have fourth thoracic, you're going to write it as T4. If it is lumbar sacral, it is going to be written as the capital, and then you nominate it. The spinals were attached to the spinal cord, 31 in number. Basically, the division or the number of nerves is 8 cervical, 12 thoracic, 5 lumbar, 5 sacral, and 1 coccygeal. Spinal nerves are there. Then it has nerve ganglia. These nerve ganglia are aggregations of nerve cell bodies. They lie outside the central nervous system. Two types of ganglia which can be seen. One is your craniospinal ganglia. That is the dorsal root of the spinal nerve that has a craniospinal ganglia, that is the dorsal root ganglia or the sensory ganglia. The nerve fibers which are coming from the periphery, they are going to relay, that is the sensory fibers, they are going to relay on this dorsal root ganglia, and then they are going to go upwards. That is, the relay is there. This is the dorsal root ganglia, which is called the craniospinal ganglia or the sensory ganglia. Then you have another ganglia which is concerned with the autonomic nervous system. That is, these are the motor ganglia, and they are basically concerned with the fibers of the autonomic nervous system and their connection with the different ganglia which are there, which are going to control your central part or the muscles, which is autonomic, that is your parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic ganglia lie at T1 to L2, and parasympathetic ganglia, they lie at sacro-lumbosacral and craniosacral. The sympathetic is craniothoracic, whereas the lumbosacral is your parasympathetic. Craniosacral is the parasympathetic, that is cranial nerve 3, 7, 9, 10 plus S2, 3, 4. That is craniosacral, that is concerned with the parasympathetic fibers, and sympathetic is T1 to L2. So your intermediate ganglia which are there, or the horns which are there, basically spinal cord has two horns, the anterior horn and the posterior horn. But where you see the autonomic nervous system which is going to rise, that is from T1 to L2, there you're going to see an intermediate horn that is called the autonomic horn, that is going to give rise to this sympathetic ganglia or intermediate horn. This is the structure of the ganglia. You can see these are the neurons, fibers which are there. Then there's the peripheral nerve, connective tissue, satellite cells, all collectively covered. Then is your spinal nerve. So how it is formed, how it is distributed, what are the plexuses, we'll talk about it in the next. Let's recollect what all we have done. So it is the ganglia which are there and the peripheral nerves which are there. You have the nerve ganglia. This is your peripheral nervous system. That is the dorsal root ganglia and your autonomic ganglia. And then these autonomic ganglia are just present where the sympathetic and parasympathetic fibers arise from. Sympathetic is going to come from T1 to L2, and parasympathetic is S2, 3, 4, and certain cranial nerves. Not all the cranial nerves. They contain the parasympathetic ganglia, that is 3, 7, 9, and 10. These exit from their respective intervertebral foramina. So these are the different cranial nerves. One is concerned with smell, two is concerned with vision, olfactory, optic, oculomotor, eye muscles, and parasympathetic fibers carry Gartia. Trochlear nerve is going to supply one of the muscles of the eye, that is the superior oblique. Then is trigeminal, most important sensory nerve of the face, and also is concerned with the autonomic fibers, or you can say the muscles of mastication, and that is going to be supplied by the mandibular branch of the trigeminal nerve. Then you have the abducens nerve. The abducens nerve is supplying one of the eye muscle that takes the eye to the lateral side. Facial nerve, this is the motor nerve. This facial nerve is basically concerned with the muscles of expression. That is all the muscles of the eye. They are going to be supplied by it. Also supplies in the midbrain. It also gives fibers to the different organs which are present, and it also carries certain parasympathetic fibers. Then you have vestibulocochlear, which is concerned, vestibulo is concerned with equilibrium, and cochlear is concerned with the hearing. Glossopharyngeal is with the pharynx, and it also has parasympathetic fibers. Vagus nerve, which is the most important vagus nerve, starting from the brain, it goes down to the abdomen part. So that is why it is called the vagus nerve. It is long vagabond nerve, and it gives vestibular the parasympathetic fibers from the brain down till the lateral two-thirds and junction of lateral two-thirds and one-third of the transverse colon. This supplies that outside. It is all your craniospinal ganglia and the nerves which are there. They're going to give you parasympathetic fibers. Outside that, the inside is up till your junction of the left two-third and one-third of the transverse colon, where that supply by this vagus nerve finishes, and the rest from there till the this anal canal, all that is parasympathetic nerve. That parasympathetic nerve is going to come from the supply is going to come from your craniosacral outflow. That is your cranial nerve. Sorry, the sacral nerve. It is going to supply it. So the part of the upper part till your transverse colon is your vagus nerve. That is your one of the cranial nerves, and below that till the end or rest, that is going to get its nerve supply, the parasympathetic nerve supply from the sacral nerves. That is why we call it craniosacral outflow. So central, brain and the spinal cord. Peripheral is all your nerves. And the cavities, the ventricles are the cavities of the brain, all in which the CSF circulates. And then we're going to talk about this mini nervous system or the enteric nervous system. So that was about a general introduction for nervous tissue. That is, what is nervous tissue, what are the components, the neurons, the neuroglia, and the general connective tissue. And then what is the division, the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. Central nervous system was your cerebrum, the brain, and the spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system is all the cranial and the spinal nerves. And then we further talked about how the cranial nerves are found, what are the different types of cranial nerves, etc., etc. So next time, inshallah, we're going to talk about further about what is left, the formation of the spinal nerve, what is a myotome, what is a dermatome, what is autonomic nervous system. And that will finish off your general anatomy, and then you have a test on Wednesday of the three topics, that is central nervous system, CVS, and the joints. So be prepared with it. Okay then. Thank you.